Cold, yes. You have a cold, or you are?
No, I am cold. This city is cold.
Oh gosh, so you're still grumpy. You're still.
I think I've decided it's Birmingham.
No,
it's not humanity, it's Birmingham.
Oh dear. Oh my goodness. What about the travel? How did you do?
It was quite successful today, actually.
My God, only killed a few people.
No.
Well done. And why is that?
Why was it quite successful?
Yeah.
Well, A, I'm here. B, I kind of got up at the crack of dawn so that I wouldn't actually, be late for anything, because I'm not very good in the mornings. Not very good. It's just the timetables.
Would you like an egg?
Would I like an egg? No, I'm all set for eggs.
Yeah.
I saw this on video through the thing. I could not make out what it was. Like some bizarre 50s kind of chat, pop culture chats, but I would pass on those things. Oh! That doesn't look like I've got a choice. Did I press something?
Put your hand under it a little bit better.
Okay, no, I don't want to. I want to give it to somebody who knows what to do with it. It's
Just
quite
put
frightening.
your hand under
I'll eat these now, just because I don't want to offend it.
That's right, if you offend it.
Certainly
Actually, it has issues when you turn the lights on and off. It also reacts, which I find.
It freaks me out.
Also, it must be a light sensor then.
Yeah.
It's blocking, when you block, the light changes.
And if you stare at it long enough, it might start dancing.
With which one foot?
That's right. Okay. All right. So, are we all here who's going to be here? Or should we wait slightly longer? See, at least I took out the walnuts, which was really causing issues. Okay.
That's also a light sensor.
Oh, it's Mattia. Okay. Matthias?
Yes.
Oh, hello.
No.
How did you pass?
No, I nearly killed the lady with the prominent dog.
You did what?
You need to kill the
And then so you failed.
Yes.
Oh dear.
What can I say?
Wow, that's a bit of a shame. Can you see everybody?
Yes. No.
Hello, everybody. See, this is what you looked like the other day. Okay. In fact, you're sitting in Matthias's place. Okay. Very good. Did you talk to Sheena about bringing back an envelope for her?
Yes, she called me yesterday, and I told her obviously I would not have been up today, so.
I've just rung and asked her to ring me back, so I can.
Okay, great. So we're going to have Mark do this.
I haven't. Mark did what?
No, never mind. Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody. I think we've got, I feel like we're missing, Daniel's finished, so he's not here.
Yeah.
Yes. He was going to also do some presenting. I think he'll be ill in that very moment. That's not your case, I didn't realize that. Anybody else should be here? Why do I feel like we're missing? Gosh. Guess we're all right. Are we ready to go? Ready to rock and roll? Okay. Who's going to start? Barnaby.
Yeah.
Okay, so does anybody want to give a summary of what has happened? Grace, you want to try? Yeah.
I got told I was doing this.
Yes. So you want to do the summary?
Okay. So last week we talked about.
Can you hear, Mattia?
Yes.
Okay.
We talked about difference in identity and difference with Heidegger, and we talked about being big B being and the difference between them as difference is characterised as the difference between overwhelming of big being and the arrival in beings.
And what does that mean?
It's So it's the space in which, well, it's termed as perdurance. So it's an endurance, but it's also an intensity where it could be classed as a place or a dwelling, and it's what sets up the surface. So you described it in the MA kind of seminar as when you're between two banks and you're in a kind of river and you're kind of being pulled under, it's all the emotions that are happening at that time. So it's not just this kind of void or a space, it's all the kind of emotions, so it's like blood and sweat and messiness all kind of involved in this one space.
So let's just stop for a second. So the notion of perdurance is related to overwhelming and arrival.
Mm-hmm.
And how is it related?
So the overwhelming.
I mean, are you saying that perdurance is?
No, perdurance is difference.
Okay, perdurance is difference, and perdurance then names something that is, you said, endurance.
So it's to do with time and
Like duration.
Yeah.
So something that endures implies infinity, or anyway implies a long time, and something that has a movement of time, so duration, right? But then what's this thing about the blood and guts?
I understood perdurance as the is as well. So linked to. Well, I won't go there yet because that's going to confuse me. But and it's this is that is the space for a dwelling or the clearing.
Okay.
Am I understanding?
Yes, yes. But at the moment you're describing it. You're not analytically presenting it. You'll get there, but
I don't feel like I can analytically kind of present it. But so I understood the is as the space in which all of these kind of emotions are wound up. So it's not a void that's between overwhelming and arrival. It's actually where everything happens, and that would also be the event of appropriation. Yeah.
okay. That again, those are you're kind of like, it's almost like you've been told this as a robot, and you're responding as a robot. But you're not sure yet what it is. That's okay. You're getting there. Chipping. Can anybody help out on this? Can anybody help out on this summation? You have a silent moment of looking at the foot. Okay. I'll take it that no one can help out on this notion of overwhelming arrival, perdurance, event of appropriation.
I say perdurance is the stand-in of nothingness.
Say it a little louder.
He calls it in the footnote the stand-in of nothingness.
Okay.
Stand-in of nothing.
And what is the nothing that's standing in?
I think it's, I understand it to be the withdrawal, the concealing part of the overwhelming arrival.
The concealing part.
Concealed.
And what gets concealed in the?
Well, any kind of arrival, any kind of unconcealing brings, even Heidegger said, brings with it the notion of a concealing. When something is made manifest, it also makes manifest the fact that it wasn't manifest before, and is one kind of unconcealing. I presume there's other kinds of unconcealing that passes over into throwness of projection. So the unconcealing arrives with the sealing arrives with the unconcealing, as it were.
Okay. We're going to put that on hold. Yes, Samira? No. Zane?
With the difference is beyond thought. It belongs to, in this relationship with oblivion. So difference and oblivion belong together.
So difference and oblivion belong together. Okay.
And difference, if you take difference out of relationship, if you think difference, you take it out of the unthought to become thought, it becomes part of identity, and its nature is in that revealing, becoming unthought to thought. There's also a concealment. Its essential nature is still in the oblivion which you've taken it out of.
Right. Good. So what happens with, so what's this thing, perdurance? Because Mark's right, that it has something to do with this unthought thing.
It's in the unthought where things, where relations start to happen, where the event of appropriation is constituted, where it sort of comes out from.
Okay, so it's in the unthought where creativity that doesn't have a direction is sort of in the pot, as it were. Is that what you're saying?
Sort of, yeah, but if you think about difference, if you bring it into thought, it becomes identity. So you have to sort of deal with it in this distance, in its concealed state, rather than.
Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, we're going to let that.
Thought without a method.
Say it louder.
Thought without a method.
Thought without a method. That's a good way of putting it. Yes, Mattia?
Could it be complete indeterminacy,
Yes.
or better, the relation to it?
Can you, rather than putting it as a question, can you explain why you think that's the case?
Because there is an element, well, there are several elements for Heidegger, it seems to me, that make the ontic presence, the small being, us, those that are historically determined. And the relation to the bigger or stronger or older element is one of determination, but determined, almost passive, towards or open to something that is undetermined, is the difference as the undetermined. And perdurance is the experience of it, which is constantly going through it. Per, the prefix means going through in this case, in Latin. So, in other words, the historicity of small beings, us, being thrown in the world, towards something that is transcendental of it, but is not anywhere else either. So this is why the appropriation exists. The other part does not exist without us, and vice versa.
So you can't talk about an isolated us without talking about the belonging.
Of an isolated being, because that would plunge us back into a metaphysical situation where we would have something like God, who is autonomous. And Heidegger seems to say to me that autonomy no longer makes sense, no longer is something that needs to be rejected and surpassed. On both sides, the certainty of the subject and the autonomy of being didn't work. I want that concealed some sort of more authentic life throughout the history of philosophy.
Grace, what is that? How are you hearing that?
I'm not hearing that.
You're not hearing that. Say it again.
All it? Okay. My impression, my reading of the concept of perdurance is that it is the experiencing continued in time. This is why I put the emphasis on the prefix per, of the relationship, the experience of the relation between determination, us, limited in time, limited in body, limited capabilities, all these, and that difference that they mentioned, Mark mentioned, that came up in various comments, which is undetermined, is undetermination as such. And the two together are the event of application. The two together are the meaningful whole. There isn't beyond, there isn't space outside of it.
So I guess, so point number one of what we were talking about last week, actually, is that the event of appropriation names the belonging. That's what you're saying. And that in point number two, that belonging takes with it, like the Trojan horse, of a concealed something that exists in the that exists, let's say, in the environment, which is an undetermined, unthought through environment, and when that is brought in, it's part of that aspect of the difference that Dane was talking about, and that creates the link of the oblivion stroke forgetting to belonging. And that link is named perdurance. Is that what you're saying?
No, what you've said completes what I was saying. I stopped at a much smaller, or around a much smaller concept. Perdurance is the experience of this oblivion and its reversal, its continuous revealing.
So let's stop right there. So when Dane raises the question of perdurance as the name of this thing where oblivion and forgetting belong together, that's how you put it, right? That's how Heidegger puts it, you and Martin put it this way. So that's perdurance. You're now making a tinier claim within that, saying, what?
But saying that what undergoes oblivion, what is concealed and then forgotten, is precisely the process of forgetting, of oblivion and forgetting of the relationship.
So the perdurance names the active forgetting that is required in order for difference to present itself.
That is where I am confused.
Okay.
Because I would see forgetting not as active. I mean, it has been active historically, but it is an active passivity. It's something that we...
It's an active passivity, yes.
Yes, I'm trying to articulate it. It's something we are subject to, or the victims of, although we are the makers of it.
Right.
And what should come up, but never does fully, is the relationship. And in that, losing it and hearing it before trying to find it, but never getting it completely, is the perdurance, and that's the condition of humans for Heidegger. This is what I got out of reading all this.
Barnaby, you have like a very serious eyebrow.
No,
Is that making sense for you?
it's interesting. Yeah.
I mean, are you agreeing with
I'm
it?
neither. I'm not disagreeing with it.
Okay. Mark?
But I'm feeling it's just missing a little bit of the duration.
Yeah, so where is that, where does experience come into the picture for Heidegger?
I don't think it does.
I think it's the possibility of experience, which...
But experience,
the possibility for experience.
can you explain that?
I think there's this kind of moment where the sort of the standing reserve, which seems to me like a possibility for all potentialities, undifferentiated, if to use Matthias' word, and then the subject stands, not literally stands, but is poised with this complete field of potentialities, and there's this link between then the perdurance which hasn't yet happened, and the field of the standing reserve, and this timeless moment seems to be the event of appropriation, or just, I'm not quite sure whether the event of appropriation hasn't happened or
Will happen,
will,
or
yeah.
is named as happening?
Yeah.
So 3 different versions.
Yeah.
Yes?
That's precisely what the problem of perdurance is. perdurance keeps happening, and so because the event of appropriation keeps happening. It's the singular tantum Heidegger mentioned in the first of the lectures we read. So it's not a utopia or a messianic end or an origin, but is a continuous coming to presence.
Right.
This is why it's perdurance, is enduring through something.
Right.
It's a continuous, think of like floating or surfing on top of a fountain, puts water up, and you're there, and this source keeps sourcing somehow. And so one is constantly in this field, in this tension, in this event of emerging and of withdrawing or vanishing. So the standing reserve is actually part of what criticizes of metaphysics. Technology is modern metaphysics for Heidegger. And it conceals and makes us forget that something else is taking place.
Lauren? It's all gone much. Okay.
I don't
Mark.
know, why does this make, what has this relation, what has this to do with the stand-in of nothingness? That's what the footnote says.
Can you find that footnote? Yeah.
In the introduction,
This one?
In Identity and Difference,
page 17,
page 17.
and there's footnote 3.
Just one second, let's just get everybody on that page. Sorry. Okay. For some reason I lost it again. Yeah, go on page, can you read it
This
on?
is the footnote, page 3.
Yeah.
Page 17,
Yeah.
footnote 3.
Right.
Ostrag, literally carrying out, this is Perdurance, he's talking about Perdurance. 3, Ostrag, literally carrying out, holding out. In the consultation, Heidegger pointed out the relationship of this word to man as the standing of nothingness. What is metaphysics, I say, I guess.
Yes.
He stated that its basic meaning is to bear, to hold out, but without any connotation or suffering or exertion. The Ostrag, the Perdurance, is the carrying out of the relation of beings and beings, enduring an intensity that never lets up. So I see the standing of nothing. It's the way it points to what is the metaphysics essay, where all beings, as it were, retreat from the individual or design. But it's this relation of something and nothing all the time. The something's always the they world as well, in the same way he talks about the clearing in terms of the luminum rational light in being a time. In terms of talking about curiosity in terms of this, but curiosity is always governed by the they world. And it's this relation between the they and the nothing, but he's talking about instance between in terms of the nothing. So he's put the they behind them, so I would understand by this. So it is a kind of, I did read something that was playing the, in Heidegger, the nobody, does appear to be the closest to the human. So a criticism. And I think that's what it is. It's almost like the guy on the end of the diving board. It's the person there in the world.
Isn't it fair to say, though, that his notion of nothing in this context has substance to it? It's just a nothing substance.
Yeah, it's the retreat of all things.
But that doesn't mean it's a vacuum. And that doesn't mean it's a void or an abyss. That's why perdurance has something to it.
It's a space.
It's a space, it's something.
Yeah.
Yeah, Barnaby.
It sounds an awful lot like tantric sex.
Okay, we had a very interesting time period. Yes, can you
this kind of this nothingness poised, if you like, on the edge of this diving board. I'm trying not to think of Sting and Trudy Steiner when I'm taking this, but
Yeah.
if you've got any other more attractive models for your tantric sex, then please feel free to invoke them. But this sort of equilibrated state, which is not hard to bear, but is desirable, but is the I don't want to use the desire in the Lacanian sense, but it's a nothingness, but it's something to be, it's something to be had. Yeah, it's not a kind of it's an oblivion, but it's a welcome oblivion.
Yeah.
Yes, and therefore I think that you and Mattia are actually saying the same thing.
Yeah, I do as well.
Yeah, it's not like there's nothing. It's not the nothing of the Heidegger of the Hegelian nothing. It's not the nothing of there is nothing. It's not that form of nothing either. It's this naming of this process that can't be filled with anything except oblivion.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
It's fair to say that is unknown to the relationship that Freud puts between unconscious and conscious life.
I don't know. I think that depends on how you're using Freud in this context,
Okay.
or how you're using Freud's notion. Well, I mean, we're going to move into the unconscious next seminar, so it's not inappropriate to bring it up. But I think that I think an argument could be made that the Freudian notion of the unconscious could act like the perdurance environment, except for the fact that one's not actually forgetting in this. It's just that one doesn't access it in the same way. So I don't know if the argument could really be held there.
Okay.
Okay. So basically, so that we're clear about what happened last week, just making sure. On the table is, first of all, this notion of what is the thing called difference, which in deference to identity, where identity belongs to the same, well, difference also belongs to the same. It just belongs at the level, it belongs differently to the same, in the sense that it holds open the spatiality, the certain kind of temporality with the endurance, with the durational, that involves this thing called forgetting or oblivion. I'm not saying that this is completely correct for all scenarios, but in this moment where we are in Heidegger, I think that this is what we've got on the table here. So perdurance names this process of the forgetting that comes into belonging once the event of appropriation is made manifest. Any questions about that? Just so we're on the same page. So just try it again, just to make sure we get this. So an event of appropriation is something that can begin the naming process of identity, or in fact, the process of identity. And in that process of identity, one finds forgetting, one finds difference. But the difference that doesn't fit into the identity moment, that difference is connected with perdurance, because that difference names that which cannot be named. It's like Jawa or something. And like you were saying, it names it in such a way that it doesn't stand outside of the system. It's trying to name something and keep it named as the oblivion, while and also talk about its movement possibilities, the movement possibilities of the temporality and the spatiality and the dimensionality of something. So what? So why do we worry about this? Why have we spent now 4 hours on this? Why should this be a problem? Do you want to, are you going to jump in on that, Barnaby, on your presentation?
Why is what going to be a problem?
Perdurance, or why are these perdurance, event of appropriate, why is this, why are we thinking these things, apart from just, I mean, we're not doing this just to become Heideggerian scholars, although that would be, well, might be a tragedy, actually. What answers the so what question? Maybe I'm asking the so what questions. I'm going to so many different meetings where they ask you the so what question. I'm turning into an admin person. I'm sorry. Here's the wrong question. I think I told you that we had a meeting where we had to do the Rumsfeld thing. You had to know all your no's. You do your known knowns, your known unknowns, your unknown knowns, and your unknown unknowns. That was a knife in the head. Anyway. So what? That's the question I have here. Barnaby, you want to try that? I mean, maybe try linking it with your own work for a start. If that fails, just staying with Heidegger.
I'm trying to stay with Heidegger.
Okay.
I'm thinking that this sort of notion, like getting some kind of handle on this notion of difference,
Yes.
is a way of marking out a kind of territory where we can experience the not I of identity.
Yes. And why is that important?
Well, it's important because it facilitates the experiencing of the not I, and so
And also the I.
and by extension, yeah, the experiencing of the I.
Not by extension.
Okay.
The experiencing of the I
And not I.
requires the not I,
The
but
not
not from a binary position.
Right. Okay. Okay.
So
And it also establishes or suggests a descriptive tool, a language because the field of I keep saying this word, the field, the kind of terrain of difference is also a linguistic one. So it gives us a potential, it points towards something within which we can describe identity.
Okay.
And the I, our I, yeah.
Okay. And that does, why is that more helpful or less helpful, or in what way is that productive for our work on subjectivity, identity?
Well, I'm going to
launch into your seminar.
I am because this is every 20 to 2.
Yeah, go on.
This call comes in.
I know. So annoying. Go on.
Just cancel the alarm.
I've tried. I've even tried keeping the phone off the hook, and it still happens.
Really?
Yeah.
Why am I going to? I'm going to launch into my presentation because it's a lot easier. But why is this interesting? Is according to Irigaray, Luce Irigaray, she makes a claim that that in each phase of history.
According to Irigaray's The Forgetting of Aaron Heidegger.
No.
No, which Irigaray you're talking about?
Her general thought.
Nope.
Probably speculum of the other woman.
You're just guessing.
I am. Let me come back to you on that.
Okay.
She makes a claim that in each phase of history there is a philosophical question which is implicit in all philosophical concerns, contemporaneous philosophical concerns.
So in other words, there's like a zeitgeist.
Right, exactly. She says that in Heidegger, it is being, or the mid-20th century, I suppose you'd like to say, but in particular in Heidegger, the concern is being. This is now shifted because history is, we've exited that phase of history, and we are now concerned with gender identity, I suppose would be the way. I can't remember the term she uses, but gender identity, and.
Can I just stop you right there?
Yeah.
I'm not sure where you've gotten this little bit of information from, but just be careful about this notion of being, not to be seen as the same word as individual, or the same word as subject.
Okay, but I didn't say that, did I?
I know, but you're implying that because the notion of the subject and the notion of the individual that gets genderized, as it were, still maintains the notion of the individual, whereas the notion of being in Heidegger.
Yeah, but the two things are not necessarily related in any way. She doesn't say.
Okay.
I mean, she could say that the. I'm putting words into her mouth, which I shouldn't do. But she might say that in Plato's day it was the democracy was the thing. I mean, things aren't necessarily related. She's just saying that there is this kind of.
Okay.
That there is this
kind
of concern for, and it's not just for
right,
Heidegger.
Okay.
So it's got nothing to do with with her approach into Heidegger whatsoever. Nevertheless, in what we're kind of teasing out here, this notion of difference is really where she starts to she gets into Heidegger, and in particular the difference between the genders, which brings us onto the piece of work which I'm presenting on, which is The Forgetting of Air, which is a part of a series of writing she does. I'm not sure if you know it.
I know. Just a small question. Can you make a bridge between the notion of forgetting and the forgetting of air?
Yeah.
Like, can you, just before you go into your seminar, because that was the question. The question was, well, what the so what question about forgetting in Heidegger or oblivion?
Well, that's it. Forgetting is oblivion. It's. I mean, we're kind of going backwards in terms of or from end to beginning in terms of her text here, but she's talking about forgetting. I mean, and this is the I suppose this is the motif which is maintained between what she wants to propose. It's difficult to say because she's during this text she's assimilating Heidegger,
Right.
and so to a certain extent she's not just interpreting him. She's recasting his ideas in a hybrid form with her own, and whether the ideas are his or hers or a hybrid is not really what she's concerned with. She's not interested in authorial purity, if you like. So whether you could, it's not really fair to say there's a thematic continuum between Heidegger and Irigaray, even in this text, because there really isn't an Irigaray, and nor is there a Heidegger in her text. It's a hermeneutic Heidegger, which is her interpretation, and then a hybrid Irigaray in this text. So it's not so much a continuum of theme, but she would say a fluidity of author, if you like, swimming around in a kind of in a thematic pool. Am I getting a bit?
That sounds quite colourful, but anyway.
Yeah, you can tell I'm probably not reading straight from notes here. So one thing she's very interested in is the notion of forgetting and return to oblivion and undifferentiation. And
so that's the key. The key is that oblivion.
I'm not sure there's a key. I don't think it's fair to say it's a key. But
the oblivion means undifferentiation in the way she's putting it forward, whereas in Heidegger he's using it as the basis to come up with difference.
I think she's returning it to identity, and it's the forgetting of the boundaries of identity, but I'm not certain about that.
You mean limits?
Yeah. But I'm not certain about that. I'd have to think about that a little bit more. What she is definitely forgetting is air.
What he is forgetting?
No, she is forgetting, because what she's done in this text is to introject the notion of air into Heidegger's thought, because she doesn't focus on any particular one text, and air becomes this way of denoting the field again. Sorry to keep coming back to this. She finds air in Heidegger's notion of the opening, which she I don't know if it's her translator, but where we've spoken about clearing, she talks about the opening.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, there's a sort of difference. I mean, there's the opening for Irigaray seems to have a much more of a notion of still having boundaries, and that within the opening, within the Heideggerian opening, is she pumps it full of air, basically. I know it's kind of like it's an easy figure, but let's go for it.
So
Anyway.
she has a balloon.
Yeah, I'm not sure she has a balloon. Let's say she has a condom, perhaps. You know.
Condom, okay. Angioplasty.
Yeah, I mean, this. I don't know. I don't suppose many people have kind of read and reread this text, because it's a dense text, and she kind of and it's a difficult text. She is she's writing to this conceit, which is air, and to try to put it really simply, this air both blows everything up, but also connects everything at the same time, because it provides. And sometimes she is sort of suggesting the air stands in for presence, but she never quite goes so far as to associate air with presence. What she is doing is putting forward air as a kind of a diaphanous materiality, which expands this opening, which then she starts to kind of populate in quite complicated ways. Now you probably don't want me to go and break down exactly, to run through all of her ideas, because we'd be here for weeks and weeks and weeks. I think what I'll do is to set up the problems that that I see in the Heideggerian terms, and that is
you as Lucy see, or that you see?
that I see. That I see in this writing. So yes, to set up the problems that I see in this writing, which she's putting into her hybridization of Heidegger, and what she seems to sort of tease out is a difference between a feminine she and a masculine he. Now, the feminine she associates with two things: the natural world and the figure of the mother, which is a reproductive figure. Now, in the text, these are just reduced to the female pronoun she, and this Irigaray associates with an air-filled space, with the opening and the clearing. Against this, she plays this male figure, which she calls he, which may be Martin Heidegger himself, or it may be a male,
all the men in the world.
all men in the world, or you
Yeah.
know, a notional male subject. What this male figure does is constantly penetrates this field. When I say constantly, I mean it's a kind of
Exhausted male.
yeah. There's an interpenetration as well. So a lot of people doing a lot of work, which brings the kind of interesting thing, which is the notion of fluidity. Well, not really. I mean,
No,
yeah,
exactly.
not really.
Where does tantric sex come from?
I know. It's to a certain extent, you've got the air of the tantric sex, and she does put she puts the fluidity into it, and so there is a kind of dichotomy between those two plays. So
The reason I was raising the tantric sex, not just to be annoying, but to say that if it's the case, as you mentioned in the beginning, that tantric sex and the relationship of oblivion and forgetting is sort of a way in which one can cannibalize, as it were, the Heideggerian move in oblivion and the kind of the sensuousness of this move of oblivion, then the fact is that tantric sex doesn't belong in at least the way in which you're characterizing Irigaray's characterizing of Heidegger's move.
well, I'm very far from being an expert on tantric sex, but
I
mean, if we wanted to put in terms of fluidity, then there's what makes it interesting. There's an engendered fluidity where one assumes that from what I know about tantric sex is that it's a dry experience for the male, but not for the female. Let's just, if we can leave it in that sort of sense.
You don't know a lot about tantric sex, and that is definitely the case. Mark, you were making faces. Do you know about do you know about tantric sex?
I know that the male is required or makes an attempt not to orgasm to perpetuate the sexual experience for an indefinite period of time, and that this sort of endless kind of deferral produces its own sense of oblivion that is not associated with orgasm. But quite how...
Who knew that this would be the way in which we would discuss Heidegger? That's fantastic. Okay.
But how much kind of fluidity goes on is...
But I mean, I know tantric sex, at least in the... I know that with some people who are gay men who, in particular, were using tantric sex as a way in which they were just, they saw it as the height. These two guys that I know practiced tantric sex, or they said they practiced it, a lot with a number of people, so it seemed like a kind of a circle jerk, except at this Buddhist level. I think that there is a lot of fluid that goes on. It might not exchange fluid, but there is something that goes on. And maybe it is the prolonging of the orgasm that makes the whole experience. I'm not sure why it would be oblivion, but it makes the whole experience more satisfying, or anyway.
Okay, I think maybe we might have different sort of banks of information of the way it constitutes. So perhaps I should
Mattia, do you know anything about tantric sex?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay.
No, with the analogy.
Though that will not prevent you from saying something. That's hilarious. Yeah, go on.
Okay, shut up, shut up.
No, go on.
I mean, I thought that it's not that far off. Barnaby brought it up. I mean, if the oblivion is the climax, what Irigaray is after is not concluding or not precluding something with a solution. And this is what she criticizes Heidegger for, to already give to the relation of we would have with something that is undetermined, a structure which she accuses Heidegger of finding in the male form of thought. So, because I remember reading that book quite a few years ago. So, she's criticizing Heidegger for doing precisely what he's criticizing metaphysicals of doing. So she extends one extra thing his attempt, and says that the relationship that takes place in appropriation in Heidegger is still captured by language which is male language. And she says that this conceals and therefore makes us forget that there is more than the male structure of the world.
And is that what you got out of that?
No.
Okay, but it was a very good summation there.
I would agree to the extent where, I think this is a brilliant piece of writing. It really is writing at its highest level, but it's also got quite severe flaws, and I think Mattia picked up on one of them, which is that there's a certain kind of tautological structuring to it, where she reads Heidegger, I'm not sure how accurate it is, and then proceeds to criticise that reading. So she's criticising the Irigaray,
already improper reading.
Yeah, the Irigaray and Heidegger, which is something which isn't necessarily terribly fair. So I agree with Mattia. I think there are certain deep flaws, But
do you agree with the position that Mattia just put forward, that she's criticizing Heidegger on the same grounds that Heidegger is criticizing metaphysics, which is to say that he's accusing metaphysics of creating an endgame, as it were, creating a hierarchical structure around which there are answers, whereas he's presenting this kind of open way of approaching the subject, and she's saying, no, your open way of producing this reading of philosophy and of art always already still brings in an authenticity, a determinacy, and so on, that you can't avoid, and therefore is, quote, male or masculinist in this way, and that's because, as she's putting it, or as Mattia's putting it, he's forgotten air.
Yeah, I think she, I'm not sure she criticises Heidegger as such. I think she remixes him in a way, you know. So I'm not going to use the word homage because that would definitely be wrong. But she's
really accusative.
Yeah, really not homage at all.
Yeah, no, I think she's. I mean, you've got. It depends on whether you regard the he in here as Heidegger, in the text as Heidegger, which it may or may not be, or it may be at certain times and it may not be at certain times. I mean, there's this kind of instability.
But also whether or not you perceive the he, which is the problem with a lot of these philosophers, Lacan being another great example, where the word he is not really meant to mean the actual beings called he, the actual male entities, but in fact, of course, it means that. And the word she is not meant to really mean just women, but of course that's what it means. And the word lac is not supposed to mean, you know, the vagina, but of course it does. And phallus is not supposed to mean the penis, but of course, so it's annoying because, you know, they're trying to get away from these things, but in fact, they're using sociological conventions to draw it.
I mean,
You're having an issue with that.
Yeah, it's really, I find the genderisation really annoying.
There's at least two levels of criticism. First of all, she's writing in like this mimetic style, so there's this kind of, she's using this he and she, and she's there's certain passages where she is, you get the kind of sense that you're, well, I was reading this book, which is quite disturbing. I don't recommend to anything, but if
Which was that one?
it's by Unica Zern, and it's called The Man of Jasmine. And Unica Zern was Hans Bellmer's lover,
Oh, yeah.
but became fixated on Henri Michaud to the extent where she was effectively sent mad, or you know, she was fixated on him to a massive extent. And there's certain kind of similarities in this. The book is almost entirely kind of an hallucinogenic, schizophrenic kind of prose style, and there are parts of this text which echo it. I mean, but you can put it another way, which is like sometimes you sort of feel she's writing in a kind of Mills and Boon way, you know, and she's using this, and there's this kind of, you know, man, and he is coming on, he's penetrating, and he's being all kind of assertive, and you know, and there's wilting flowers, and you know, and it's, you sort of, you know, you can start feeling little bits of sick coming up in the back of your throat. But she's doing it deliberately to be provocative. You know, she absolutely leaves.
She really isn't a Mills and Boon.
I don't think so. I feel on fairly safe ground to say that I don't think she's really.
Now, I've always said that we had unique ways of reading in this seminar, but that's really unique.
Yeah, Mills and Boon.
Yeah, it's good. I think it's a good way to think about her.
But she's doing it to be provocative, to kind of like to annoy you. Exactly, she's looking for exactly that.
And it's working.
And it's working. However, there's a secondary layer of criticism of that, which is that why kind of invoke this binary at all between male and female? You know, if you're interested in exploring femininity or the feminine psyche, why bother invoking, you know, a male, even if you're interested, and what she is interested in here is relations, and this is where the Heideggerian, she starts to illuminate certain aspects of his thought, which is, yes, we're talking about identity and difference, but what she's bringing into the mix, if you like, is that there's this kind of relation, there's this kind of relational aesthetics, you know, that's happening in Heidegger, in this writing. This is what she's interested in. Who controls this? But you can criticize this, is how much of this is relevant to identity. You know, and how much of this refers back to Heidegger is, if we're interested in identity and discovery, how much of this needs to be done through a relational aesthetics. You know, I mean, Heidegger seems to start by criticizing this with the A equals A, which seems to be set up the whole relational aesthetic, and she seems to emphasize that. I'm not sure she ever truly seems to criticize it. You know, even though she seems to almost become fixated on this relational aesthetic between the male and the female, without actually asking, not simply why look at the male at all, but why look at another at all, why look at a relation at all. And it does read, sorry Mathieu, I can see you got your hands up. I'll just finish 1 second. You do sense that, I know she's coming at it from language, and we lose a lot of that sense because her language, which is French, has genders and English does not. But some linguists will say that the genders in language do not refer to the genders that we, they don't play these gender roles like it.
They don't play the binary version of the gender.
Yeah, I mean there are like plugs and sockets and things are referred to as male and female, but they're not necessarily kind of they're not duplicates of gender roles. You know, they're not. You can't look at a plug and a socket and say, well, this is a sexist construction. Interestingly, actually, plugs in France are hermaphrodite. So
See, even better.
So there we go. But okay, I'll probably just talk for a little bit. Unless
Mattia, I guess like shock yourself. Yeah, Mattia.
Well, Barnaby raised the issue of how can one discuss identity from the Irigaray point of view, or why Irigaray pretends to discuss identity with the argument she poses. To me, I mean, she seems to try to discuss otherness beyond in a position that makes it hierarchical as a relationship. So the opposition male-female, which historically as the female as the order of male, therefore, and afterwards, is what she wants to challenge here.
Can you say it again, because you went a little watery on the.
She's criticizing a notion. She wants to put forward a notion of otherness that is not based on a position. Most importantly, does not end up being structured as a hierarchy, where subject hyphen male comes first, at least logically, and therefore female.
One moment. Hello? Michaela, I'm in the middle of the seminar. Can I call you back? Okay, bye. 4.
And therefore female comes second and only in relation to male. And this is something that
so the relation is always in a ladder sort of scenario.
It's hierarchical. And what Heidegger tries to do is to break this hierarchy and saying that the hierarchy is concealing something that we forgot, which is a more related and constantly generated identity to the relationship.
But let's say that she knows that. Let's say she understands that that is the case. Why would she then say that he's forgetting air?
Because by referring, it doesn't probably come so, it doesn't become so evident in these lectures we're reading, but in other texts, Heidegger refers to language as the place between quotation, where the relationship comes to the presence is mostly evident. And sometimes it's language, and sometimes it's not precisely poetry. And she says that language is always already codified in a male way, and Heidegger just reiterates that, therefore fixing the structure once again.
So how would the injection of air change that?
It's the body part of language, that language is carried by air. That there would be no sound, no utterances, no words without her. She's really opposing, the other opposition that comes up here is the opposition mind-body, if you like, or thought-body. Mm-hmm. She's saying that thinking of identity just in terms of what goes on in thinking, in thought, is again concealing and therefore forgetting that the body is there as well.
Right.
So Barnaby is right when he says that one should understand this problem, this question posed in terms of plain sexuality, male, female, but it's always the idea that something is put beyond the boundaries of the current structure of the world. And if it is accepted into the structure, it's only as subaltern, hierarchically lower.
Right, okay.
And this is what she's arguing against.
Okay, hold on right there. Lauren, you want to say something, Barnaby?
Well, I think it's the air that she's accusing, like Heidegger of forgetting, is the air of absence, and the air she's talking about is the sort of air of flesh, or the sort of materiality, sort of fluid, the sensual air. So the air in the opening, which is really bounding with Heidegger, I think is what she's saying, is like this, that's an absence.
It's like a stale air.
Yeah, well, I suppose like it's sort of this, because I think she's accusing the sort of clearing this sort of void thing is, well, I definitely think with her air, she's trying to get at, because there's sort of two forgettings of air going on. There's Irigaray's forgetting of air, and Heidegger's forgetting of air, and the air is different, I think.
Okay. And Irigaray's forgetting of air is?
Well, the bit where she's talking about the sort of the fetus in the womb, where it's all sort of fleshy. It sort of brings this kind of well, she contrasts that with when the baby's born and the mourning involved.
Do you say mold?
Mourning.
Oh, the morning, yeah.
Involved because of the outside. So there's this. She's also criticising Heidegger for sort of setting up the inside and the outside, and whereas the air of her air is without borders, whereas his air is still setting up these insides and outsides, as well as a mourning of this sort of materiality, which. So what is the materiality? Before the baby is born, when it's in its fetus, it's in this much more sort of fleshy, sort of borderless materiality.
So the baby is still breathing air, as it were.
Well, actually, the baby's having everything provided without the air. But I think her tone is quite sort of castigating of Heidegger, and I thought that was kind of like a bit because of this thing about the Nazi thing. And I thought it was even like kind of this reference to air is almost like a forgetting of the gas.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because like the gas for the baby for the air, and then this point of well, breathe is this sort of intersection, and like so the Nazis the gas kind of extinguishing there. So there was a sort of, although that I haven't got to anything referenced in that in the text, I thought sort of I feel like she almost allows herself to be so accusative because this is the sort of thing that's very obvious with Heidegger, and there wasn't this apology or whatever. So she's allowing herself to be sort of stridently sort of.
Can I just intersect there, because I mean it's an important point. On the identity and difference lectures that Heidegger gives, when he first gave the lecture, people were assuming he was going to apologize. They thought that the rector's address was going to be an apology, was going to start with an apology, and he never apologized. And so the identity difference lectures are always caught up with that question, unlike all of his other works, unlike Being in Time or anything else. It's caught up because those were addresses that were given after the war when it was assumed that he would say sorry. And that he didn't say sorry, this created a huge atmosphere. As you can imagine, if you were dealing with a philosopher today who was involved with a genocidal party, let's say, and that was still writing very interesting work, on some level it would make sense to want to at least make a mention of it, you know, or bring it in a very sarcastic way. So you can see, rightly or wrongly on some level, on let's say the argument of the interpretation of the logic level, maybe it's going too far, but on another level, it's not going far enough in a certain sense. So I think that's a very interesting point that you're talking about in terms of this gas air versus the, unbounded or limitless air, versus which is part of your blood and part of your, so you don't actually need actual air and so on. Blood, your cells have blood. The red is blood. The red is oxygen and so on and so forth. Blood. But on the other hand, Heidegger's use of air creates the division. Right. That's what you're saying. She's saying.
Yeah, I mean, I think her position in Heidegger's body is the wrong reading of what Heidegger's doing.
Yeah.
But I don't think Heidegger, is there air there in the first place in Heidegger?
Ah.
I mean, I don't.
Did you find it?
That's precisely the point.
She's put the air there.
She's saying that the air is not there in Heidegger, and this is what Heidegger has forgotten. And Heidegger still reasons by fixed points rather than.
I don't think Heidegger. She's saying Heidegger hasn't forgotten it. He's missed it out.
Yeah, he's missed it. He's unable to see it because he's.
Because the air is female.
He is still enframed by the same technology he's criticizing as contemporary metaphysics. And indeed, in the Forgetting of Her, there is at least a chapter where she brings up, and it seems to be random, the cosmology of Heraclitus, if I'm not wrong, where the
cosmology of Heraclitus.
Yes.
Yeah.
But the events at the beginning of time are complete chaos of mixing things, and then a fire burns them, crystallizes them, and they become the shell of the sky as we see it with all the stars in place. So fixes things that were before fluid. And that's somehow is a good poetic metaphor for what she's trying to say, is that Heidegger criticizes metaphysics for fixing things into solid object and solid subject, but does not escape that. And she brings up the argument again from the point of fluidity once more. And
she also, which is absolutely right. So she says he's missed out air. She says that air is a feminine construct, and that is why he's missed it out. But she then goes on to explain air as a feminine construct, because air and this I found quite disturbing in her writing, is that there's this kind of notion of the female as reproducing, and the air is a kind of is a sort of seedbed for the voice, and for the cries of people hearing, and the distribution of cries, vocal utterances. I mean, it's an interesting idea, but then one doesn't know. It's like one finds oneself. Ironically, when we talk about a member of the Nazi Party, I found myself far more compromised by her notions of gender than I do, particularly about Martin Heidegger's philosophies. Philosophies, because I don't really see any overt Nazism there.
But that's partly because you're reading it in English.
Possibly.
No, sorry, because the whole obsession with authenticity comes much clearer when you're reading in German.
Okay.
But it's still, I mean, I think it comes down to the question of not so much can you find this in his theories, because I think a very solid argument could be made that you do not find it in his theories. In fact, there's a book by, several books, but the main one by Christopher Finks, F-Y-N-S-K, on Heidegger, I can't think of the exact title. In the last chapter, it's an appendix, is basically why one cannot read Heidegger as a fascist, as a Nazi. And it's a very interesting, important essay on that type of take on it, for the kind of distancing oneself as a theorist, as it were, a philosopher. But I think the question becomes whether or not the he, she arguments that get put in, does that bring in a wider thing called patriarchy? Is there such a, as an ideology, or as a premise, or as a religion, or as a whatever, which it sounds to me that that's where the anger comes from. I'm not saying that her use of it is correct, because I've gotten totally irritated with Irigaray and all of them that use male and female in the way that these kind of really reductionist ways. But it seems that in the drowning in the difficulties of patriarchal encounters, that where how does one address the misogyny and the whatever the usual sexisms that one finds, since the sexisms themselves are always organized around reproduction and reduction. So I'm not saying that this is the best sword fight to have, but I think that may be what's at the basis of that fight.
I personally, I would be slow to use the word patriarchy here. I think that the anger, which is there,
palpable,
comes from a rejection of the privileging of the male, which I don't think is quite the same as patriarchy here. I mean, she says that
I think that's right.
she having kind of feminized the air or introduced air as a feminine construct.
Or introduced air as an essential construct, an important construct, and therefore a woman is important, not subsidiary.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Then the crying out that's the leap that the Heideggerian leap that we were talking about. So the crying out across the air, the inflated space, which is inflated by the air, and thus by the female. That's the Heideggerian leap. So she's saying that if it wasn't for the feminine, you wouldn't be leaping from there to there, because there would be no there to there. And this is I think this is the core concept of this, at least the first part of this text, is that from A equals A in Heidegger, she's gone to there equals there, and there equals there is female. And this is I think, if I had to sum it up, is really the core part of the gist of her argument.
So there are females in this class right now. What do you think, females in this class? Reproductive tracts. Sorry. What do you think? What is this? If you hear this kind of thing, are you hearing feminism? Are you hearing racism?
Yes.
Okay. And racism about?
Well, it's putting sort of gender where it isn't, and it's sort of placing gender where there's sort of becoming. So it's sort of missing the becoming that Heidegger is trying to get at. And then it's saying, oh, it's the becoming of the natural, and that's female.
Good.
So.
Grace, what do you think about this? Does it speak to you at all?
She's just going from kind of one extreme of pitching male against female to another extreme where it's just privileging female, so it's not really getting anywhere else, it's just a different point of view. That's how.
Yeah, okay. So, and Samira? But you've been listening. So what do you think? I mean, is there a role in having the words he and she used as conceptual vehicles to make something happen? Like Deleuze talks about becoming woman, that's deeply annoying. Derrida talks about the Cora as female. Again, irritating, I find. But that's me, and that maybe is me and Lauren. I don't know. But there's a lot of feminism. That takes us on as a very important, and I don't want to gloss over it. I want to make sure that we're seeing it for what it is, and not just for what it is, but racist and horrible. But no, but for, does it have a role? Does it have a role in saying this there to there, which I think is a very smart way of showing how that sort of gets set up, is the invocation of the female leaping, as it were. And that what he, and so I mean, not that it should be female, but to the degree to which there's something other than male happening in the world, or other than man, or other than the one. Yes, Mattia?
Then would it be correct to say that Irigaray identifies certainty and completeness with male, or better, says that they are the attributes of the male conceptual frame, and abstraction as well, which is third element. While, as Lauren was saying, the sensual part is what is constantly excluded or silenced.
Yeah, yes, exactly. I mean, it's a difficult call because, on the one hand, if the sensuous is always reduced to being female or always connected to being female, that's problematic. And on the other hand, if it's not included or only seen as woman's only seen as being, I don't know, reproductive, that's also a problem. So the question is, how does one bring in the female, or even the hermaphrodite, female, androgynous, male, all the five genders, as I always call it, the male, female, androgynous, what is it, hermaphrodite and ish, those five genders, and where they all move.
But see, there is the very short essay first titled "The Sex Which Is Not One."
Yes.
Where she sort of debates the fact that female sex that is apparently far more body-based as an art. Actually, it isn't. But the female sex is described as the order of male sex in the art is far more complex, and there isn't one sex organ, and therefore there isn't one gender attached to it. And that which is not one, to me now equals the indeterminacy that Heidegger attributes to difference.
Yes.
So what returns here, this is why to me her argument is the copy of Heidegger's argument, just one round wider somehow, it includes more, is between things that are closed down and fixed and something that is still moving, something that determination versus indetermination.
Do you think that it's helpful to call it male versus female, or male and female?
It is and it isn't. I mean, her point seems to me, I mean, I don't know any more text than forgetting about this one I just mentioned, but it seems to me that she is identifying, she's saying that the closing down of identity into fixed subjects is as being the expression of a male culture. Which, as Barnaby said, in this case, is not directly patriarchal, but it's the expression of a male culture. The ruling, the power is firmly held in men's hands. So what she's saying is that the epistemology of this world is male, and she's trying to bring up elements to show that it is arbitrary, that it should be that.
Di, what do you think?
I don't know what I think. I don't understand why, when it's referred to as male, it's always thought of as men.
Yeah, I like the way you were introducing it. Those males that will use the pronoun he, and then those females that will use she. Yes, implying that she could also be he and he could also be she, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
So then it's not.
So I'm getting a sense from this. Dane, did you have a position on this?
Well, I just think it does sort of work as a pivot. You know, if female and male just switched around and they sort of move around in relation to each other, you've still got a pivot, a centre point where they're just stuck in the same old sort of power relations. There's no real change in there. It's just moving about.
I mean, this is an interesting segue. I wasn't expecting this along with the tantric sex in this seminar today, but it seems to me just to just put on the table to think somewhere, because in a lot of the work you're going to come across, it doesn't matter, you just pick them out of the air. Marx, Lacan, Hegel, whatever females are discussed, it's always as an example, a sub-point, this kind of thing, on the one hand, of being a put down, or the reverse. You know, the most intelligent, the Cora, the superior sex, the one that can think things through, or whatever, And so, on the one hand, or Nietzsche, when women are discussed, is always as this conniving, you think, God, you have had issues. you know,
From experience.
here's, you know, really, honestly, you know, I mean, so you had syphilis. I mean, you know, like, it's not really the female fault here, you know,
Yeah,
or whatever.
There was his sister as well.
There's this sister as well.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. It is a hard life. Okay,
Yeah.
not to get into.
Nature in his women. It's
It-
not a good example.
No, but you see, in his work, when he refers to, you know, heroes, they're not female. They're always male. And they're males. They're not like meant as, you know, this generic human body or this generic human being. And when there's been an attempt to criticize this by by elevating to the same level the female body, it does ring hollow. Because it does, at least in my ears, because it does then seem to me to be playing to the same tune as exactly the thing that's being criticized. But I guess my question is it exactly the thing that's being criticized? I mean, because again, I mean, I can find yards of feminist discussions on everyone from Plato onward, with women showing how this is sexist. It creates a epistemological mood that, you know, supports patriarchy and all the rest of it. And so the question is how to break that, how to you know, whether or not that's true, how to break that. Yes, Barnaby?
I think that, I mean, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm sorry, perhaps should have interrupted because you were getting there.
I was finishing with that.
I think it's very, very dangerous. You have to make a clear decision whether you want to read dead white males and understand that they're going to be shit on women, as well as many other things. And you know, if you want to go back to Plato, probably shit on property owning and slaves. You know, in his Republic, which
Not
was
so good about heterosexuals either.
yeah, all these kind of things. And it's all very well to say, oh, you know, that they're shit, or to even kind of to forgive them and say, well, these were unenlightened times, and since it wasn't an area particularly of their concern. I mean, I was sort of trying to recast, you know, when future generations come and, you know, revisit my works.
I love you, Barnaby.
How will they see it? And I mean, for instance, something that I'm not particularly interested in, and probably never will be, is the environment, which I appreciate that it concerns a lot of people, and perhaps they're right. And you know, when future generations come to study, you know, my text in 200 or 300 years' time, will they blame me as being some kind of denier, and you know, perhaps my text won't receive the proper kind of attention that they deserve, because I will have been deemed an environment, you know, a global warming denier, you know, and I could be ignored, and that would be tragic, obviously. But it's not something that particularly interests me, and you know, I have a sort of position of ignorance on it. I realise that other people are, you know, it occupies, you know, lots of their life, whether they're for or against it. I'm just not that interested, you know.
But in a way, if you're interested
Can we-
in
can
difference,
we blame-
you
can
are
we-
interested in it. You're just kind of making the environment like kind of climate
The
change
other.
issues.
No, I mean, I'm
Right.
politically implicated, because we're all politically implicated in just about everything. But we can't be actively kind of engaged, you know, unless we're writing op-ed pieces for, you know.
It's not true to say what you feel about it is concealed, rather than, you know, to go back to the Heideggerian. If the environment overwhelms you, or the talk of the environment overwhelms you, arrives, then what is concealed is actually how, you know, how you would actually articulate the same with another topic, you know, overwhelms and arrives, you know, and you have to not have a decision about it, or have a decision about it. But that surely is the concealed part. It's not that you haven't got ideas on the environment. If you at a push, you know, we could probably
Very, very
Find
few.
out that you were.
yeah. But at the moment they remain concealed, as it were.
But I mean, in
In
the
the
question
arena, concealing.
of let's say feminism and gay politics,
Hmm.
at least the earlier form of feminism, or one of the forms of feminism, like I said many times, was all about biology is not destiny. So the idea of using these male-female pronouns was kind of crazy. It was an attempt to try and, you know, rid oneself of these kind of moves. This moves into a queer scenario or gay stroke queer scenario, because in the beginning, i.e. in Stonewall, queer was, or gay was the word that was used for male and female. And so the whole expression of gay male wasn't because people couldn't get out of the male, it was totally into talking about men. It was because gay male was a type of gay, just like gay female was another type of gay, and gay hermaphrodite is a third one, and gay bisexual is another one, and there are lots of gays types of things. That got politically sutured into the male, and usually white male, hence queer emerges. And queer then attempts to do exactly the same thing that gay was attempting to do, which is doing exactly the same thing that feminist biology is not destiny was trying to do, which is to say create some forms of beings that are not against something, that are actually creating a positivity. They're not against heterosexual, they're not against, I don't know, men or women or black or white or whatever. So you have a totally different kind of identity process. What I find compelling about these books, like the Irigaray of the world, even Derrida, even Deleuze, you know, the piece I did on animaterialism, becoming mouth breast, I took that term mouth breast because it annoyed me so much in the Deleuze and Guattari thing. Every time I read them, I just think, you know, you want to know why your work is not doing as well as it could be, boys? Because you keep saying stupid things like mouth breast. And then I got into trying to write about, well, what is it about the mouth breast that could possibly work in this scenario? What is it? Do we have to reduce it to the female breast or the male breast? And if it's female breast, should that be only a motherhood breast versus a, you know, I don't know, sexual breast, you know, or the bestiality, which we use, that's why I use Samantha, Samantha's last name now, right? Sam's work, Sam Sweeting's work, where she's always dealing with her breast and having animals sucking off of them, having nothing to do with milk, you know, just to do with the senses, and so on and so forth. So you have a different play of the game. The question is, why are these games, the ones that are so reductionist about male and female, seemingly always taking the prize on the course outlines, on the, you know, even, you know, with the different political movements emerging, you know, you always have this kind of like divisions. They just seem to keep going back to the male-female thing, no matter what. It's kind of fascinating. And I'm wondering, is it because I'm reading, in this case, Irigaray, who I also think is written quite brilliantly, and I also think is deeply flawed, and so I put her on the reading list in order to try and like prove to myself that I'm not as misogynist as I think I can be sometimes, because I can't bear some of the feminist writing on it. It just drives me nuts. And yet I read this stuff, and again, I just go, wow, once again, you know, never meet your heroes. They're just so annoying. They turn out to be so terrible. And so I'm asking you as students, do you find anything in Irigaray's work that doesn't do this?
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Barnaby.
Yeah, I thought it was a brilliant piece of writing and quite inspiring, because it's not, first of all, it couched within her method, which she seems to have sort of invented, this sort of fluidity, destabilization, withdrawal of obligation to use verbs in many cases. Is an elliptical sense. Now, whether you want to call that a kind of a gender type of writing, I think it's very, very interesting. It means that when she's using these very rigid gender definitions, that sometimes they're hollow or undermined by the fact she's writing in this mimetic style.
Mm-hmm.
Their stability is always undermined, because you know that there can be switching going on, switching of identities behind pronouns. Things can have multiple identities.
And that's what you mean by the mimetic, just so in case people.
No, the mimetic style is to, when I described the Mills and Boon, and I've passed this book around, right? So if she's writing in a Mills and Boon style, or how I perceive, I could try.
That's so great.
But do you know what, I could probably pull out
yeah.
a passage if you give me a couple of minutes. But
But just for people,
She
what
is
does mimetic mean?
She's mimicking.
That's a good thing.
She's mimicking a Mills and Boon style in order to expose it. She's parodying it effectively, and she's hoping that you spot that she's writing in Mills and Boon style, and rather than swooning, you say how ridiculous, you know. That it's a parody, a parodic way, and there's she.
So would you agree or disagree with what Lauren was saying, that she's basically being fascist?
No, I don't think she's being fascist, because fascism requires a kind of a bullying technique where either the majority forces you to do something, or a minority forces you to do whatever. But either way, you're being forced by an authoritarian presence. She doesn't insist on anything in her text. I mean, yes, okay, she's pissed off, and so she's writing this in 1970. So early, you know, this is an early kind of feminist critique, and as such, you can imagine it. Its motivations, its motivations are raw and crude, because it's early and people are still pissed off, and it's not really fair to read it now, 50 years later, and say, wow, that's just too light and dark. You know, where's the shades of grey? Where's the fuck yeah? It's like saying, well, Marx here.
I think I do to say, where's the 50 Shades of Grey?
No, I can't be that cheesy,
Okay,
and I can be really cheesy. What I can't do is find out the Mills and Boon part.
Do you want to respond to Barnaby?
I think I'm sort of. I think she's generally sort of trying to criticise Heidegger's arguments. So it's not just like some kind of entertaining parody.
She's not doing it to entertain.
So
she's doing it to annoy you and to provoke you.
I think I suppose what I think about it is it's too easy. It's too easy to parody. Perhaps if she got the arguments right, then it wouldn't matter that it was parody. But I think it's not working, so it's just irritating.
And what are the arguments that what's one of the arguments she gets wrong?
Well, I suppose I think that she's not quite getting the becoming sort of thing. I don't think she's going to get the materiality with this fluence matter thing. But I've only just read chapter 1 and 2, so I don't think I'm sure about it.
Sorry, Matilda, did you want to say something?
I have a question that is somehow looking at the problem from outside at this point. What if, instead of trying to reach an ever-inclusive logic that might be the one of identity versus difference, or the one of some sort of male conceptual frame versus female, or rational and sensual, whatever we name, what if instead it wouldn't be far more interesting, fun, and maybe even productive to reason from within the dimensions we have? I'm jumping somewhere else, but I think it applies to these as a question. I'm not saying this is a solution. I'm thinking of one of the things that the board says in the Society of Spectacle, where it says that there is no place outside the spectacle. And therefore it would be useless trying to find the spectacle from an external position. And that finds his example in the methods of the situationists who appropriate the material of the spectacle and manipulate it in order to jump it. It is obviously an artistic response to a political problem, but I'm thinking because we could, precisely because the move of Irigaray is to take Heidegger and reapply it to another problem or a different set of dimensions, but more or less in the same way, which is the critique that has emerged today. And I'm thinking that if not, then then we are criticizing Irigaray more or less in the same way, that to set up not a binary structure. So that seems to be a sort of vicious circle that we are falling into. And I'm thinking, what if instead of trying to find an individuated aperture somewhere, we just find ways to play within what we have? I can't articulate it any better.
I'm not sure where we're going with that, because I don't know the we and the have is
We, the
clear.
question that we are raising, I mean.
No, in the sense that it sounds like the reason one goes to Heidegger after Hegel is because or after Hegel stroke the dialecticians, is because there is a way, or I guess putting it slightly differently as a question, is there a way to think unity and cohesion and let's say surfaces so that the limits are not either pre-given or established in such a way that requires an Archimedean point, an outside point, and at the same time can deal with change, uncertainty, history, and it seems to me that if one cannot resolve the Heideggerian move, one is back to Adorno, because Adorno is the best version of the dialectical move, because he is able to see that in terms, which I'm not saying is a bad thing. I'm saying this is probably maybe the only thing, the notion of the negative dialectic, how that operates. It just, the only problem with the negative dialectic, as at least is being put forward in this course, is that it's not able to deal with dimensionality. It's not able to deal with the way in which the sensuous actively activates the bringing forth, as it were, of art. So that's what I think part of the task is. And that's why I wanted you to take a look, all of you, to take a look at the forgetting of air, because to circle back to this whole question of perdurance and oblivion, and whether or not we have them as gendered or non-gendered items. Where does experience come into this? Where does the making, where does the sex, the blood, the poetics, the unconscious, the seances, where does this come into this? How do we approach it by using these kind of tools? I mean, philosophy is no good if it's not going to do anything other than make us navel gaze, which is not uninteresting, but it's not all that interesting. You know, did you find your Mills and Boon?
I didn't, no.
Okay.
No, I'm sorry. I'd rather listen to you
To check out.
grub around in
Okay,
bits
so why don't you just continue with the similar one?
Okay, so, well, I think I was getting to, I think we talked about this leap. I think without going through all the text, which I haven't finished, I suppose the one thing I still want to say is, because it continues from the question you've asked, is if you like, the so what question. Once you've got these, if you've got, it's called kind of cliche notions of gender, which perhaps now are starting to look outdated. That now that anger has partially subsided. Are these constructs still in play? If we can remove them from patriarchal notions and look at them just in terms of kind of privilege or expectation, can we revisit them as constructs from a gender neutral perspective? And I think there's an interesting thing to be had here, and that's the notion of transgression, or rather of boundary, and then transgression, and somehow the engagement you asked about. You just said about how do you experience? Well, somehow this is me talking rather than Irigaray. Somehow there is a piquancy added to experience if you can either acknowledge or re-establish like boundary elements, which then can be transgressed or perforated or become porous or must be observed. And it's this question of whether if they're not being insisted upon by authority, any kind of boundary, whether that's gender or identity or class boundaries or anything that you can really think of, if they're not being insisted upon by authorities, do we then have an undifferentiated field? Is that what we're looking to experience? Does that make experience more or less interesting? My contention is that it's the latter, and that less interesting, and that in fact if we can own the boundaries and we can put them up, even if they only apply to ourselves rather than imposing them upon other people, then it makes for it's a non-fascist it makes for a non-fascist life, to quote Deleuze, but it also makes for
Foucault.
Is it Foucault?
Introduction to Deleuze.
I'm sorry.
So,
Then-
Barnaby, you said if we didn't own the boundaries.
No, if we owned the
Yeah, but
boundaries.
that's probably precisely the point. If one, any sort of identity.
Because she does that, by the way. I mean, she calls it the
Whoever
envelopes.
is so
She goes at what?
She calls it envelopes.
Envelopes, yeah.
If one would own that envelope, if that envelope would be one's property, then, and by that one, it could be any sort of assemblage, any sort of intersection of vectors and practice that holds together for a while and controls the way it holds together, then the problem of fascism will be solved. It seems to me that the problem is
How
that
would wait a second.
envelope,
How would the problem of fascism be solved if you owned
because
it?
that solved. Because the envelope is always, in the way we are finding it seems to me, is always coming from outside. Identity is fixed and imposed, and one falls in it or not.
Oh, right, okay.
So if that is, I can decide where I place myself, how I place myself, and the name I give to myself, the myself, it would go past this issue of finding a boundary and finding oneself on one side or the other, and therefore with all the consequences that follow.
Okay, that, I can see that. Let me just circle back to what is being said or so, because I feel like, again, this seminar's gone whoop, and then sometimes comes out, so I don't want people to feel like lost, this side of the room, they're lost on this. This bit of the room. In fact, there's only 3 people that are not lost. Okay, the question of experience and the question of history, or the question of having a position, or even having social agency, they're all bound up together and they're being used interchangeably at the moment, and I want to throw in a warning about this. On the one hand, Marx, for example, makes the argument that there is no such thing as neutrality. You have an opinion no matter what your opinion is, even whether you recognize your opinion. There's history, there's the material, there's the condition of the age. There's no ability to interpret something outside of that condition. That's different than talking about the experience of the condition of the age. So, on the one hand, I hear someone like Irigaray and also the interpretations in the best sense of the word, trying to think of the condition. And the condition is like a he or the she or whatever. It's not the experience. Because if I then took it forward, like what you're saying, Mattia, and said that I was inhabiting an identity, and I came with my identity as a sort of fixed position to read or to be involved with the world, then I would always already be trapped in that identity. I'd be trapped in that experience. So this is why someone like Wittgenstein and the whole gang of people that talk about experience as something that you can't really experience, not as a sense of holding it to account. Because if you hold experience to account like that, then it creates this block, it creates this envelope that you can't get out of. So then you're perceiving through your envelope, as it were, and you're bringing this entire edifice into the picture. And that's being challenged by all of them, by Heidegger, by Hegel, by whomever. All of them are challenging this question, with the exception possibly of Kant, this role of experience. And yet at the same time, one wants to say experience counts for something. The question is, what does it account for? And what I'm just asking you to be very careful about, all of you here, is not to conflate the question of the material conditions of reality with the question of experience, which may be the same thing, but be alert to the fact that you're doing that little shift. And the third point along this scale of points, so the first one being the social agency conditions, the second is where does experience fit into this, and the third has to do with how is this notion of forgetting, concealing, arrival, overwhelming, actually challenging the structural edifice of, let's say, reading the conditions of our time differently than does dialectics, or any, or let's say pragmatic philosophies or analytic philosophies, which we don't even talk about in this class. But just don't think that there's only dialectics and that's the end of the story. There's obviously other stories. But how is it that Heidegger is beginning to appeal to a different form of either an epistemology, or maybe it's a methodology, I think it's an epistemology here, this ontotheoretic move that that Lauren has correctly identified as as saying something that is, in fact, let's say, and same with you, Mattia, saying something that is, let's say, democratic or anyway heterogeneic, putting the heterogeneic forward. And then you have Irigaray coming in saying, oh, you think you're so clever. It's not as heterogeneic as you think. And you still can't get out of the metaphysics, which of course Heidegger admits anyway, but anyway, that's another issue. You still can't get out of it. And here's another way to negotiate the problem. Now she does it in this, I don't know, Mills and Boons versus patriarchy and, you know, women, W-O-M-M-I-N kind of approach, you know, i.e. without the men argument going on there. And the question is, does that in fact, does that little tinkering or big tinkering with the way in which one understands difference and the theologic logic, does that work? And that's, I guess, where we are right now in your part of the seminar. Does that seem clear to people? I mean, does that little...
Could you say the last bit again?
Is Irigaray attacking Heidegger for the sake of attacking him because he's a typical, you know, irritating creature and we've got the whole Nazi problem behind him? Or is she also attacking him because it is true that his work leads to still a way of sealing identity despite his attempts, despite his ways of either including including difference within identity, or including difference both within identity and also as the concealing or the concealing oblivion, and that she comes in and says, look, here's what the problem is. You've actually forgotten how air operates in your system. You've forgotten how the voice operates. You've tried to get out of narration, and you've gotten completely into the narrative structure. And so let's look at this narrative structure. Let's look how voice operates. It operates over a system that you're taking as a given is there when you don't need to take that as a given, because in fact the air or the female or the leap is precisely the thing that's not meant to be taken as a given, but also needs to be analyzed.
I think that what she is doing is penetrating Heidegger and assimilating him.
And alien.
Yeah, yeah, if you like, wearing his clothes. And that act itself is possibly a kind of a methodological explanation of her thought. You know, this kind of, she's destabilising identity. I don't know whether I don't know if she's I get the sense that she's angry about the privileging of the male as she sees it in the work of Heidegger, but I don't think that this is not a woman with daddy issues, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is just a text about somebody who she's selected, but this is air. She also selected Nietzsche with water and two other elemental. She's constellated, if you like. She's arranged. She's actually formed her own authority based around the elements of these philosophers who happen all to be male, but one suspects she might have had a very limited field if she'd have wanted to pick female philosophers. So in a way she's answered your question of earlier on, which is she's returned to a strict kind of, if you like, an elemental arrangement of setting of positionality. But she's done so by curating her own set of philosophers who she has penetrated and rewritten and written up and then arranged in her way. So she's done a bit of both. She's destabilised identity, or rather the non-porosity of identity by, I mean, there's a I'll try and find another little passage about where she penetrates I think it's she, meaning in this case at this time a kind of a mother figure who penetrates the male, and it's quite poetic. So maybe I'll find that. Haven't had much luck so far. Comes with putting page numbers from the original text and not the PDF. But so she's done two things. She's both refuting a kind of hermetic idea of identity. I don't know whether that goes against Heidegger or concords with him. I'm not sure it's particular. I'm not sure she'd want to see it in either of those terms. I don't think she's against Heidegger at all here. You know, that's a really oversimplistic reading. Just based on when she's pissed off. You know, she can be pissed off and agree with him. It's not worth being pissed off at something that you just think is moronic.
And then work on it.
And yeah, you know, and then work on it. So it's not her against Heidegger, just because he's got he's a privileged, but he privileges masculinity in his text. But to finish my sentence, she's destabilising this sense of identity, and she's moving because of this whole constellation in a kind of a larger project. She's rearranging something in a very, like I said, a very simplistic, easy to understand way, which is I'm going to write 4 texts. They're going to be named after the elements, and I'm going to pick 4 philosophers. So she's reascribing this. I mean, I call it a constant. She's constellating. You know, she's placing.
But there is something to be said about
there's
picking
order
elements.
There's order there. There's a fundamental reduction to order, and that, as you've said, that is a very, very political gesture. You know, and that is unambiguous. That is a political return to order, and I mean that it could be as complicated as or open itself out to kind of controversial kind of notions and discussions more than anything else she's written there.
So where does that leave us with this seminar for today? What are we doing for time yet? We have about an hour, a little less than an hour or 2. Where does that leave it? Today was meant to bring in the forgetting of air and to sort of elevate or somehow look in a more detailed sense of how difference, what is difference? You know, what is difference? Let's first of all, in Heidegger, how come it's relevant to identity? What happens with these basic terms that are going to come up and up and up in your theses again and again? Event of appropriation. Perdurance may not show up, but event of appropriation will probably, or even event will show up. In case in your case, it is your thesis, you know. So I mean, write that down. You know, how does that? I mean, and Di, it's going to be part of your thesis. The question of difference and same, and what are these things? What we spend a lot of time. It's difficult reading Heidegger. Which, by the way, before I forget, there is the possibility, does anybody know who Stephen Liu is, L-O-O? He's from Australia, he's an architect and an artist. Anyway, he's going to be in the country, he's a Heideggerian poet character, and maybe one of two possibilities. Either he'll come here to speak in March, around the 7th or 8th of March, or he may come to my house in London. And if he does, you'd be invited to listen to him. He's quite an interesting character. Anyways, I'll know later today whether that's actually happening. Why? You know, we sat down, we hammered out this seminar series to include identity and difference, and in it, Irigaray. Is this helping you? Is it, I mean, are the books so difficult that it just, like, you know, yet again another, you know, migraine headache coming on? Because it's no good if it's not helping you on your thesis. Barnaby, is this getting to your work?
Yes, you know, in a simple word. I mean, they might be difficult, but they're not going to be more difficult than if I'm doing them on my own.
Well, that's true.
If you want to write a thesis, you can't just say, you know what, I'll leave out the tough stuff.
Yeah.
So you know, I'd rather have it set with a kind of little whatever.
Well, I mean, I guess
deadline.
I'm asking the question maybe in a bad way, because what I'm trying to say is I'm assuming that it's crucial for your thesis, okay? Because that's how I think. But I'm hoping that we're going at a pace that is, I'm not sure if it's glacial or if it's like a rabbit. I'm not sure which pace we're at the moment, because we've got different levels of people intersecting on these questions.
I think we're going very fast.
Very fast.
Well, I'm not saying that's a bad thing. That's not criticism, but it's definitely not glacial. This is going fast.
Okay, you know, so nobody thinks it's glacial.
I do.
Okay.
Glacial.
Yeah.
I think it's quite useful to go like
Shoot him.
faster sometimes than
I think it is.
That's right.
I do. I think the Heideggerian is a slow-moving front. I think Irigaray might be a rabbit, but I think the Heidegger, because when I read this, or rather didn't read it, because it really pointed straight back to the text that Heidegger was coming from, which is the one at the very end of this book here.
Yeah.
It's the in the philosophy and the task of thinking. So that's the glacial part. That's still slow moving underneath. But I think the Heidegger as a whole is this slow moving lesson. The whole thing for me is moving. So,
No, I meant the pace of the seminar, not so much, but you mean the pace of the
well,
seminar.
I can't really divorce the two. I think the
Or to
rate
put
of
it
the-
slightly differently, I'm asking for
Do someone
a
shoot?
normative thing. I think that it should be glacial in the sense that to understand, here's what I'm asking. Heidegger and co. need to be approached in a glacial way. Are we doing it in a way that you can approach it? Or is it like, you know, if it's Tuesday, it must be, you know page 3 to 74. I mean, is it like too fast the way we're dealing with the glacial moment of Heidegger? Or are we at the right timing for you?
I mean, I have to say that, I mean, I first looked at Heidegger with you 2 years ago or whatever. Didn't have much of a clue, you know, like vaguely.
Feel better beside people.
I mean, you know, A versus A, waves. I mean, I can remember some of the things, some of the kind of motifs. We had a pen and a board in those days, you know. It was back before computers.
It's like 2 years ago.
But my grasp was completely rudimentary. I'm not saying that I couldn't do it another 2 times, you know, in 2 years' time and 2 years after that. But I suspect that you could probably look at Heidegger once every couple of years for, you know, the rest of your life and get a deeper and deeper understanding of it.
But
But,
okay,
you know, I don't
let me
think
try it again.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get.
But it's not possible in the first pass to.
Yeah, in the first pass to get this, so don't worry on this side whether or not you're getting it in the first pass. My question is whether or not the seminar is able to be inhabited, because you're very quiet, and I want to make sure that your quietness isn't just total fear. That in fact, Hartley is coming in so that you can at least draw back to your own work. That's what I'm trying to.
Makes me want to look up stuff again and rewatch the video and read again and then come back next week. So I think that's good, yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
That's the best they can ask for.
I feel like I need to read this again at some pace to try to think it through.
See, what I found from the side point of view of, you know, being the teacher or the master or whatever the thing here, is that I thought the Bremen-Freiburg lectures would be very helpful in opening much more the identity difference work. But I think, listening to you all, that was less helpful. What was more helpful was actually to stick with identity and difference, with using the Freiburg-Bremen lectures underneath it, and then move into Irigaray, so you could see how it was being used. And I just don't want to go either too fast or too slow in these kind of moves, because I've not put together the seminar like this before, so I don't want to lose you in the process of, so that Mark and I figure this all out, but that's it.
I found the Bremen lectures, I don't know whether it was just because I was more concentrated when I was reading them, but those I sort of thought I was getting a hang of. And then when I returned to this, which I'd already read,
This being,
the identity difference,
Okay.
like the first part, I was okay for a bit, and then it just got really difficult. I was thinking, oh, I wonder whether it's to do with the translation, and perhaps the translation in the Bremen is better, and that's why I can get that. But
that may be, actually, in part. So you
I
found the
think
Bremen.
I was like, last week I was reading this in the library after the seminar, so I was a bit mushed by then. But I was finding it just, you know that stage you get where you can't really, everything just won't sit down and fall into place, and you can't really move. You move on to the next paragraph and hoping something will fall into place, and it just sort of, and then other times you're reading and it just really flows nicely, and you kind of go at rhythm and you're following it.
And what do you do when it doesn't make sense?
Well, sometimes I take a break, sometimes I slow down, or just reread it, give myself time to sort of, don't necessarily, sometimes I try moving on next bit, because that will make something, like, I just keep going and then I reread it and I see it differently. It's like sort of seeing how many different ways I can take it until something sort of slots in a way that I think I'm getting it. So just keep pursuing it.
It's a good idea to know that is likely to happen without a strategy, you know.
Yes.
Because
yes.
I mean, I think I remember for my masters, I think it was Derrida's ABC Limited.
Yeah, Inc.
ABC Inc. That's right.
Limited Inc. It's called.
And I think I'd read 27 pages, and I just didn't understand. Just ploughing on because it was, you've just got to read this. And all of a sudden, it was like a page. It was like, oh my God, that's fantastic, you know. And it's somehow kind of. I'm not saying it necessarily just didn't get it, but oh my God, it was fucking boring, you know.
Yeah.
Oh, it was just horrible. And but it was a set text, and after 27 pages, there was 2 pages of total kind of, you know, light bulb going. I'm not saying that I suddenly got what the last 27 pages, but I understood page 28, And after not understanding 27 pages, that's, you know, it's like taking a drink at an oasis in a desert. You know?
Yeah,
And but you just don't worry. My strategy is don't worry. Just carry on. It doesn't actually matter if you don't get it. Probably, maybe something goes in, even though it's not conscious. And if you've got the time, reread it. But you know, if you haven't, just you know, plow on.
Mattia?
Isn't this method of studying and making endurance?
Yes.
Keep going
I think
over
we
it,
say that.
going over it. At a certain point, some sort of link network opens up. Not because it's already there, but because by going over it, it is established.
Yeah. Yes. That's a very good way of putting that. Okay, so now let us continue now with your Mills and Boons. Or are you done?
Well, that's it. Do you want me to? I'm pretty much done, but what I'll do is read out the words. This is a passage, a very short passage.
Oh, what passage?
It's a very short passage.
Oh, very short. Is it a visual passage?
Of interpenetration, and it's on page 32 or page 39 of the PDF.
Okay.
It's the final paragraph on page 32, and it is actually in a kind of Mills and Booney way, although in this particular passage, the language is the same, but the genders have been reversed. I'm not only am I not an expert in tantric sex, I'm not much of an expert in Mills and Boon, but
I don't think that for a second.
so somebody might call me on this, but I'll start. In the first meeting, before his thoughts beginning, she gives herself in the form of fluids. These fluids penetrate into him, exceeding all boundaries.
Wait a second, you said you didn't know what Mills and Boon.
The envelope that serves.
What? What did you say? It's the forgetting of air.
Yeah, but what page? I've got 39 is not as fun.
Okay, if it's page 32. Page 32, final paragraph.
Oh, yes.
Okay, these fluids penetrate into him, exceeding all boundaries, the envelope that serves as ambience for him there, the envelope of his body thing, the envelope of his organs and mucous membrane, the envelope of his cells. This way of entering into him goes beyond all possible categorizations, intelligible or sensible, at least for him at present. He takes her into him immediately, without even any perception of the difference between perceiving and perceived. This penetration that constitutes him at the beginning takes place in darkness. This gift, without measure, remains undemonstrated. She does not offer herself to be seen where she gives herself. She does not appear where she gives herself, does not even let herself be called or named in that place.
I want to meet Judah. Oh, darling. This is so, that is hilarious. Okay, so what do you make of that?
Oh, first of all, I like it.
Why?
Well, it goes back to what I was saying about boundaries and things like this. In this case, you've got a very conventional, like I said, almost romantic text, subject to reversibility, gender reversibility. So it both appeals to me because it's been reversed, but I enjoy, it's personal preference, I enjoy that kind of thing. I enjoy gender play.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very clear one. I enjoy gender play, and I'm interested in concepts and notions of penetration. So so this appeals to me, simple as that. Which is why it was highlighted in red. You know, had it actually been, you know, a written word, so it'd probably be, the pages would be stuck together and things like this.
And
I'll stop there.
And how do you read that, though? Okay, apart from the fact that it talks about penetration and there's the revert, what is she actually talking about there?
Well, she is. I mean, in a real way, she's talking about the notion of identity. what's important here is she has put she's put boundaries up to be exceeded. She calls them boundaries. She calls them an envelope. She calls them a membrane. And I said
Organs.
Well, organs is what's inside in you know.
But it's a play. It's a play.
Yeah,
on,
it is a play.
Genitals as well.
Yeah, and you know, then it I mean, if you wanted to criticise, she's doing precisely what Mattia says she's doing, which is having kind of criticising Heidegger for being too figural and too object oriented. She's inserting a very, very figural object, which is the kind of the notion of a tegment, you know, covering a carapace if it wasn't so easily penetrated. But she's also having kind of established those. This is why I like her, or I like this text. Having established these boundaries, she then transgresses them, and in transgressing them, it's a kind of shorthand way of transgressing the notion of identity, or rather singularity. That's my word, singularity.
Yeah. Yeah, go on.
Well, I thought this bit, I mean, I know that you can read it in that sort of sexual kind of way, but I thought...
That was my Richard Burton.
This is right.
Without Welsh.
That's part why I find it irritating, because it sort of reads like that. But then what I actually think she's trying to sort of speak about is
What page is it on? I can't seem to get the right page.
Embryology, embryosis.
32.
So I thought she was trying to talk about the kind of event isn't chronological, that sort of the embryosis goes through. So trying to get at the event in that sense. And I thought that's what she was referencing here, so these fluids. So the like when the egg is developing in the womb and as it becomes the fetus, it's the body matter, flesh, which is then genderising as a woman, is penetrating the egg, the fetus development. So I sort of read it at that stage, because later on she's again referencing that sort of stage. Although at the same time, the way it reads, with this penetration, sort of sexual words, it does make you think of like a sexual act kind of thing.
Well, it certainly makes you think about that.
Yeah, but I think what...
Yes, Mattia?
No,
Okay, sorry. So go on.
But it's so she's yes, there's that reversal going on one level, but then that sort of deflects from an argument which could be more radical at getting at this different sense of difference in terms of how.
But if you read it, if you start, this is why I was wondering the page, because if you back up on page 30, the bottom of page 30, where you know she's talking about in that section she's been talking about the bridge and the voids and the way in which you know the kind of the two entities begin to start to belong, this, you know, and how it gets connected. And she then says, in the place of the first receptacle of him or of her, in the place or in place of their meaning. So it's a double play, because it's in place of in place of the first receptacle, as opposed to in the place of the first receptacle. So one is taking place of the receptacle, and the other is using the receptacle as a place in which they meet. So she's doing the double move there. In place of their first meeting, in the place of their first meeting, there is now void. To pass over it from his side, in any case, a bridgeway. This bridge is for returning the first empty envelope, the envelope of the void. So in that version, the place and in the place are being established as neither gender, but requiring both belong, as it were. And then then it goes into, this yields a double envelope or loop, the sign of infinity. The sign of infinity question mark. So now she's entered into the, you know, that infinity sign. She's saying that the bridge is for re-turning. The bridge is for turning, returning the first empty envelope, the envelope of the void, into another one. This yields a double envelope or loop. Okay, then she goes further down. There is no longer any not inside or not outside here. Here the whole is, colon, taken up again in a flawless double encirclement. Then she goes further and says, a proposition does not have two sides, one below and one above. At any rate, not one when it holds by itself. It no more adheres to a substratum that ensures a founding than it overflies itself to estimate the distance from, to gain a perspective, a point of view. What is set forth, it holds by, it holds in and for itself. From where does it as such derive its matter? And it goes on, and then she gets into this question of the matter of the forgotten. For there were not this side of the first envelope, she who from the first supplied the nourishment for its constitution, organization, and interconnection. So I didn't read that, at least in the first passage that I was reading it at, as the woman is the only one that provides the nourishment, but that in this example, the she is the purveyor of what's going on. And that in this context, you have that the matter that would have been in the void, would have been in place or in the place, is now forgotten, and that's what the void is. In this the same forgetting, is this the same forgetting? Is this there the same forgetting of her? Is this the same forgetting of her? Repeated indefinitely. Is she forgotten 2 times, at least, and then forever? Or is there a double forgetting? Are they female? Are they at least 2 indefinitely forgotten? So in other words, is the he and the she 2 she's, or 2 he's, or 2 he's that are doing a she type thing? In other words, how does matter come into the void?
So,
Yep. And then it goes into the Mills and Boone. You know, in the first meeting before his thoughts beginning, she gives herself in the form of fluids. These fluids penetrate into him, exceeding all boundary. No. Okay, so go on. What were you saying with you?
the problem then is, especially rereading the paragraph of Barnaby, where in the light of all the questions you wrote before, to me there are important set of words. One is halfway through the paragraph, where it says, it takes her into him immediately without even any perception of the difference between perceiving and perceived. And then 2 lines below, this gift without measure. So she brings up here an existence before what I call them framing, which is also what it was positionality in the framework lectures. In other words, before there is a distribution of rationalized dimensions.
Before there's a distribution of what? Sorry, you went.
Rationalized dimensions of any sort. It is existence before the difference between perceiving and perceived is between myself and outside, between I and self. So there is a double reading, because Barnaby is right in saying that there is more beneath the surface of the text, but at the same time, it is true that she's drawing from the idea of a person starting into existence before being captured by all the dispositives of culture, but at the same time, she's speaking about the framework of culture itself. And what I find, to me, it explains it, you know, it's without measure. There isn't yet a reference point. So he, she, our, no power. There is no economy installed yet. If it is without leisure, there is no difference between perceiving and perceived.
So, in other words, there's no difference that's
It is
been.
not. Or vice versa is pure difference. There is no. No, it's not that. There is no fixed difference. There is no certainty installed and respected as such.
I think what the economy that she brings into it is having kind of having associated air with the open field, which is the standing reserve, and having associated that with the female, the feminine, she says that is a situation without limits and without any original borders, and as such it forms an excess, and that this conforms. I mean, I didn't go into this, but this conforms to a kind of Maussian idea of a gift, which is that there's a gift without exchange. So there's this discontinuity between the male subject, or Heidegger, and when he's doing this event of appropriation, when he's kind of leaping out into this void, this air-filled void, he assimilates her. So though perhaps you could also read this, rather than she penetrating him, he's assimilating her, and when he's assimilating her, he's forgetting. That's the forgetting of air. He's forgetting her body, and that's him forgetting air. Mm-hmm. And she seems to think that what energizes this is this woman or feminine as excess, whether it's the natural world, but it's because there is the feminine is doesn't have boundaries, or at least not in its originary state, or she as an originary state.
The thing that she's calling the originary state without boundaries, she's calling she.
Yes, and also air.
Mm-hmm. And air, in that sense, doesn't have boundaries.
Yeah, and she is also, she is also a mother figure, so it's kind of like...
and she's a mother figure because she can create. She is the ontic relationship to creation.
Yes.
Okay. What's also quite sort of...
Which kind of coalesces, this mother figure coalesces because then there's this fluidic penetration, which is at times milk. Mm-hmm. When at first she means breast milk.
Mm-hmm. No, it means Cadbury's milk. Cadbury's chocolate milk.
Get some of the sweetening.
That's right.
Oh, what I also noticed as well reading through these chapters was sort of, I always wanted to sort of kind of, always drawing our attention to sort of the first or the prior, or the sort of before, which doesn't somehow escape enough, or isn't a radical enough sort of kind of in terms of getting to an event where the new. I mean, she sort of wants to get the irreversible. I've got that here. Oh, it goes in one direction only, except on occasion with respect to what isn't any good. So I think that the implication is that the repetition, the closed off repetition, the reference to what isn't any good. But it goes in one direction only. I thought was a reference to the irreversible. That's just after that fluid bit. But on the other hand, she's always trying to sort of say this natural thing is first or prior. I don't know, which doesn't sort of get a sense of the new where it wasn't prior, it couldn't have happened before. Which is much more
because there is no
irreversible.
before.
Sorry?
Because there is no new before, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I suppose well, as soon as you have past, present and future, you've sectioned things off. But
right.
In the sense of like a new which couldn't have happened, if you wanted to still use that terminology, if you then said, well, what couldn't have happened before, if you wanted to make a distinction between what couldn't have happened before, could it, whereas can happen in its instance of happening, irreversible in that sense, that relates to a more radical difference. But in fact, then that difference also relates to the event, which doesn't get split up into that sort of past, present, future thing. It sort of gives rise in an emergent way as opposed to sort of just a manifestation.
So, if that's true, then why does she start chapter 2 off, which is on page 23? She begins chapter 2. I can see why you're saying that, Lauren, and I think that makes sense. I think that that's a very generous and kind read, considering where you're coming from with Lauren, who is Irigaray before. But on page 23 in chapter 2, she says, between one and the other, between a male one and a female one, there is at least at present no passage. So,
yeah, I mean, I
what does that mean?
with her in terms of this
There is infinity in between. I thought to maintain. Sorry, I did not. Did you interrupt?
No, sorry.
To maintain the half metaphor, half point. You know when cells split and they go like that.
Okay. Thank you.
I thought that the half split cell recalls infinity, not because it happens in cells, is what but it helped me visually to formulate the concept. Between 1 and 2, between perception and perceived, or no, she, here, there isn't anything but infinity, pure difference. It's openness.
Mm-hmm.
And then said the bridge is what is installed logically afterwards.
Okay. So the bridge comes after the split.
But the split is not originally because it's an event in tandem that keeps happening.
Yes. Is that clear?
I thought the bridge was already there, and the bridge was infinite. But so when the bridge is installed, does that suddenly?
The bridge is metaphysics.
Yeah, but but the bridge is not finite. It's an infinite bridge. It doesn't change the condition of difference from infinite to finite when the bridge is installed.
It does.
It does.
Yes.
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
Because the bridge is what puts these eventum tantum or singular tantum into a straight line of a chronology.
Well, the bridge is what generates meaning.
Okay.
And if there's pure difference.
So the event is always the event of order.
Well, the event is the event of making meaning.
Yes.
And
okay.
and in terms of making meaning, that may mean order, but I say it in that sort of lumpy sort of way, so that you don't think that all meaning is linear, or all meaning is
No, but
relational.
what I'm saying is that in sort of constantly brushing against, between quotation, infinity, then the meaning is constantly rearranged into new orders. But there isn't a bridge, because it's never stepping from a point to the next step, or from outside to an inside. It's just a distributing of it. And this is not what it is before. She speaks of a gift without measure. She thinks a gift without measure, that remains undemonstrated, is something that is without being A is A or A equals A. It's just A.
And that's why it's a gift.
Yes, but that's also what, and the gift can only be without measure. Here she brushes, so she goes quite close to some bits of Derrida and Barnaby, probably Barnaby knows better than I do, but it seems to me that this is the point. The gift without measure is the one that doesn't yet have a bridge, that
Or a string.
or a
Attached.
string,
Yeah,
or anything that allows it to be evaluated for possessed or motor soul. Or
So if one has a gift, that often refers to a kind of psychic or a kind of an ability that has no string attached, as it were. If one receives a gift, or if one is given a gift, that implies that there is no such thing as a gift. In the Derridian sense, you know, or in the you know, friends, there are no friends kind of argument. You know, in other words, there's never a time where a gift could be given innocently. There's always a trail. So there's two different forms of the gift here that's being put forward. But if we just have to keep beating this point home, but you might be right that between one and the other, between a male one and a female one, there is at least at present no passage. That doesn't imply that there is this infinite moving moment. It implies that there is no ability to connect.
But they are irreconcilable in what she's saying.
What's that?
Are irreconcilable.
Yeah, it's irreconcilable. Yeah, it's incommensurable. So what I'm asking you in those kind of, not to pick out a sentence and then sort of run with it, but in that attempt to throw out the question of difference or how to substantiate, because in that same chapter, she then develops this question of infinity, the gift, and so on and so forth. So that she begins the chapter by suggesting there's no way to have a connection. And then she ends up by saying that the connection is always already a gift that is undifferentiated in its pure state. And that in making it make sense, a bridge is brought forward. But this undifferentiated moment is the air. And so in fact, of these two sides, where they both appear to be equal, one is more equal than the other, and the one that's more equal than the other is the female.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm asking you, do you accept that as an argument?
No, and this is why I think she is
No!
going back onto the same. She's just going around one more circle, exactly along Heidegger pattern, and in this case, she's even adding a third element to that. Times it seems so. No, hello.
Yeah, wait, no, we're all listening to you. Yeah.
So by setting up again air or the she air as this forgotten element, she's covering the same steps as of Heidegger that speaks of being with a big V or the returning difference as the other part that is constantly covered. And it seems that the relationship that Heidegger seeks remains elusive for Irigaray as well.
So do you think, I mean, I say this to the whole, yeah, that's an interesting point, actually. Do you think that if Romulus and Remus were raised by a she-heir, as opposed to a she-wolf, would that have a different meaning? Would that involve a different meaning? Would a she-heir, does that take away the genitalia? Does it take, or it seems to, whereas a she-wolf not only adds genitalia, but it adds passion, wolf. Mm-hmm. And what I'm wondering is, what is this heir? Why should it be called she? Other than the fact that, you know, it's supposed to be the font of being able to breathe. Because a lot is lost in the air. In the air move.
It's very uncomfortable, some of the conclusions that you can draw out of this.
Yeah.
I mean, thinking about this now, I mean, she's saying that this event of appropriation, this leaping into, is a kind of effectively destroys the female, destroys this presence. So what the implication is that it's not proper. Agency is not proper to the feminine, because that seems to be what she's criticising in this thing, and and moreover that the kind of destruction of the female body. She says, the female, where did I find that? The female body is sacrificed. I'm going to find the quote in a second. I'm not very good at this quote finding. But if you get the sense of, if you accept that the feminine is this kind of this standing reserve, this general economy, this thing without this unbounded kind of sense of place, if you like, and that when it's leapt into, and when the event of appropriation, this subjective male agent does this, because this place is operating in surplus or in excess, that the female body is sacrificed, then it also seems to imply that any kind of agency requires a commodification and destruction of the feminine, and in this case the embodied feminine, and so if you accept her primary logic, then it seems to be that the lack of boundaries of the feminine in the first place will always be a surplus, will always result in a surplus, will always mean the destruction of this surplus, and the female body is destined to be destroyed or to be assimilated by the agent who's male and will be destroyed, precisely forgotten in the process. Which maybe is why she really is pissed off.
But it does, and then I mean, unlike what people said at the beginning, I actually think that we're moving back in time today. I think women are losing agency, and the kind of, like I said, it's an absolute miracle that in terms of the U.S. that it was a slightly different outcome than would have been had Romney. A very different outcome in terms of what would that have meant for rethinking what female is, black, white, all the different, Muslim, but the very intensity of fundamentalist religions that have come to the fore have created this kind of vessel of woman as not being an agent. It's kind of the worst version of this, instead of this kind of utopic version of woman as something other than male. It's this version of woman as an idiot, or as a slave, or as a something other, or as, again, superior but in a different realm. So it's something to think about, actually, in terms of what is being literally said here, politically said here, anthropologically said here, and then philosophically. These are all the different slants that I'm trying to get people to get a sense of how that operates.
I think it's on this particular subject, as in gender equality, social gender equality. I think it's very dangerous to say the West, because I think there's a very clear demarcation between what's happening to the role of women in the United States for the reasons that you said, fundamentalist religion being the kind of motor factor, but social conservatism, and that which is happening in Europe, where at least at the moment there seems to be quite the opposite imperative.
And also what's happening within different places around the world. I'm thinking Pakistan, the shooting of
girls. I mean, those are more obvious. But I think I made the comment in the first place, and I was specifically thinking of Europe. I mean, yes, I completely agree that the analysis in the United States is it's suffering under fundamentalist religious practice. I mean, or they have far too great a voice in a political voice, in my opinion. So the same doesn't apply. But in European terms, I think that we're getting to a stage where
frontier
of liberation strategies of gay liberation and women's liberation, you know, I think is coming to pass. At least, you know, the consensus here across Europe is, you know, when you have countries like Spain, which has, you know, gay marriage laws, was one of the first countries to put it in place, you know, and the UK can turn around and say, well, if Spain can put gay marriage on the statute books as a Catholic country, why can't we? You know, I think it's the final end game in terms of kind of political equality, you know.
And that requires a politics of social agency, or anyway, agency.
Yeah, I mean, it's very, what I just said is a very nihilistic reading. I hadn't kind of like hadn't come across that, you know. You know, it's a very depressing reading, isn't it? I mean, how she's viewing it. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how right I am in that reading, but you know, it's maybe worth reflecting on when I'm going to go away and read the rest of it.
Well, I mean, okay, we have 6 minutes basically. Here's my question for next week. Next week we're meant to be doing. Yes, of course.
Well, it's almost as if she's saying, wanting to claim inventive differences as female, whereas the male is only good for the representation, and then, but she doesn't even get at this effect, because this difference that she's claiming of the female is a natural, is a nature. She doesn't get at the difference of the unnatural, in that if you took the connotation which Leotard refers to when he refers to the work of art as the least natural event in that sense. So
that's good. That's I think an important point. So what you're saying is that you're understanding Irigaray's remark about the event as being pure differentiation, by which is also meant female.
she might have claimed it that. Yeah.
Question mark. Whereas Leotard is saying not only is the event not pure differentiation or difference, it is the kind of muddying of that. It's the different form. It's the way in which there's heterogeneous form.
Oh well, not.
Okay, maybe.
I'm saying that what she is speaking about as nature, as difference, is more like a kind of perfect replication as opposed to sort of the imperfect repetition of a more radical difference.
Mm-hmm.
Where, I mean, actually, I think nature, its replication process is always to be imperfect. That's why it's open. That's why it's an open system, if you must call it a system, but I won't call it a system.
Economy, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, there's something that has a pattern to it. So you're saying that what makes something open is not its ability to keep moving, or like the eternal return of the same. What makes it open is that it's able to return difference.
Yeah, maybe. I'm glad you got with that. Now I've gone too much.
You've gone too much.
I've gone too much again now.
Yeah. Okay. Anybody want to say anything before we, Dane, do you think anything?
I was thinking,
yeah,
is
Mark.
it possible to read Irigaray without falling in the trap of the metaphysics? Because she's always read in terms of totalizing female, meaning transcendent totality, where it may not necessarily be read like that. It might be a very personal piece that, you know, that is actually engages with something in her life and existence that we are now participating in. But there's a certain kind of reading that does sound very metaphysical. I'm just wondering if there's other kinds of reading that wouldn't keep totalizing, and then would make the whole thing read in a completely different way, which is not good for every book, I should wonder, and stuff like that. But it is a different kind of reading altogether, non-metaphysical, non-totalizing in its arguments, which is a different relationship to the text. Maybe, I'm not just suggesting this, it's just struck me. There's a different way of reading.
I think it's an important question, actually, because
you keep seeing female in the metaphysical way as a totality, transcendent totality that brings in difference. You keep reading it in that way, as though she's always talking about females everywhere. Whereas it's not necessarily.
But I do think she is talking
she is
about
doing
females.
that, isn't she? Yeah,
I mean, like I've tried to read Irigaray by replacing it with females with like flowers and males with, plates or something.
Yeah.
Something completely, nonsensical in a certain sense. And while you can do that, the political energy that she's on about is very important not to miss. What I am concerned about with feminism is there a way in which we can look at the question of difference without forever bringing in totalized notions of males and females? And I don't know. I can't. At the moment, maybe my brain's going to mush, which is a rare moment. But I can't. With the exception of the new new feminist group that's come out, like Isabel Stengers, Karen Barat, Donna Haraway, which is kind of a nice thing to see, where they don't talk in these terms ever. The ones that, when you think of Kristeva, or you think of Irigaray, or you think of, what's her face that did the eunuch book, name, Australian?
Greer.
Germaine Greer. It's all this male-female things, and you wonder, who's the audience here?
Well, in the 1970s, it's a terrible time. Well, it's a very odd time. It's a very strange time. 1973, Bell, a member of Parliament, Bell talks out the private members' bill that brought equality to pay for men and women. 1973, he manages to talk that out. You try to think of that now. Who would do that? You would not want big men and women to have. So that is the time. That is the
but
time that they're
1973 is
talking.
not that long ago.
It is. It's like another world. It is. It really is.
I know, but
Other
technically,
countries.
just
Yeah, but when you think, like,
So she's in that
yeah,
world.
women didn't even have the vote in France until 1948.
hey, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah.
Trust me, but and also the question of civil rights and whatever. Then you start talking about anyway. All of this is very important and interesting. And my question to you is: do you want to go more into this, or do we go next week into our Freud? What do you want to do? Which is and Kozlowski. We didn't even get to.
Does really link with this economy thing.
All right, so
There's
we.
3 references to economy in here, which
Okay, so how about if next week we were meant to be doing difference via Derrida. We made this too quick. Maybe we should try the Kozlowski's living currency and reconnect it with the Irigaray. Yeah?
Yeah.
So could you reread chapter 2 in particular of the Irigaray? And then if you have time, chapter 3. Barnaby, you want to keep being the presenter with us?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And then who's doing the Kozlowski? Are you doing it?
good to have a go.
Or were you doing it, Mattia? I forgot.
Laura and I were somehow in tandem here.
Okay, right.
We in sync.
Do you want to do it with them? Yeah, I think that'd be nice for you to talk with Mattia and Lauren so you get on the same page. Okay, good. Give it a go. The worst that happens is that, you think. Good, okay, good. And Barnaby, if you have a few minutes, I'll talk to you about your stuff. Great. Hard seminar today, good seminar.
Any question? Is there still the symposium of the 8th of March?
It's happening, yes.
At South Bank?
Yes. It's happening, I think, at the Photographer's Gallery.
Photographer's Gallery. And are we invited to participate?
Of course. In terms of speaking, see, the thing is that Andrew Fisher is organizing this one with Daniel. So what you need to do, for those of you that want to go to the, well, we'll put a thing up, but basically on the 8th of March will be the second installment of the photography thing. Sorry, it'll be happening in South Bank. But it's kind of a euphemism for happening at the London's Photographer Gallery. We're just trying to get a sense of where it's going to be. I'm not Grace, I'm not organizing this. But there will be a general email once Andy Fisher, who's in Hamburg, I think right now, puts this out, and there's going to be the people from the Flusser archive are coming, and there will be some people connected with the sort of Berlin side of these issues that have been going on with the digital. And I don't see why you wouldn't be invited to speak. But I'm not sure how that's going to actually operate, because it's the ball's in their court on this one. However, on the 24th and 5th of May is the On the Verge of Photography. Big conferences, international conferences happening here, which is the bookend of this one. And we're going to try and bring Karen Barad in. Barbara Bolt will be one of the keynotes. We're hoping Karen Barad will be another one, although she hasn't been heard yet. So, but I'll send out more information on that. Thanks for reminding me about that to you. Okay.